I think. In the suit. Oh, all right, wait a moment.
We are on camera? Oh, God.
Are we on camera? Are we on? Okay. Okay. Again, welcome to everyone to the Town of Nantucket Finance Committee meeting, John, for Thursday, January 9th. What I'd like to do when I know that we're on camera, I'd like to introduce everyone to the members of our audience who are watching. And on the TV screen to your left, which is my right, members of the Finance Committee are Christy Kickham, David Worth, John Tiffany, Craig Sperry, Jim Kelly, and Cliff Williams. Tim Savarino and Steve Morey are not here yet. Thank you for tuning in and watching. Is there any public comment today that is not on our agenda? Hearing none. Approval of minutes. We're still waiting for a packet of minutes, which will be coming. Correct, Terry? Correct. Working on it. That's great. Committee reports. There is an audit committee meeting scheduled for Tuesday, January 14th at 10:30, I believe, upstairs in the training room, where the management letter for the most recent audit will be discussed. All are encouraged to attend.
Mr. Chairman?
Yep.
Will the auditors be here? Or is
They'll
it
be there by Skype, I believe. Or by,
They will be present.
oh, they're going to be present. Oh, okay. Yes, they will be present. Yeah. Christy?
That's the 14th, you said?
The 14th. Tuesday, the 14th.
And is the management letter available ahead of time, or?
It has...
The management letter will be in the packet for the audit committee, which will be posted online.
It is online? Okay.
Well,
Not yet.
I will post it tomorrow.
Okay.
we actually,
Good.
there were some revisions occurring to it as late as today, and the auditor wanted to get all that buttoned down, so we should have, I haven't been on my email.
I haven't seen it.
But we can pull it
I
down
haven't seen
from,
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can
I'll tell you what, when I get it, I'll send it all out.
That'd be great.
How about that? So don't worry about that. I'll send
Thank
it
you
out.
very much.
And
Financials,
because that's why I was, yes, in fact, I didn't want to ask in front of everyone. I was wondering where we're getting it. So be tomorrow, Martin, probably? Okay, that's great.
That's at 9 o'clock?
No, 10:30.
10:30.
10:30, January 14th, in the training room upstairs.
Okay.
All right. I don't have any other committee reports. Anybody have any committee reports? Christie?
Just Human Services Grant Review was, we met yesterday and just started our
good.
sort of deliberation on our recommendations, and we're going to meet again on Monday, and we will have, we started putting a report together, which we'll have to do as soon as I can. As far as scheduling, I haven't asked Mary if, what is it, the 24th?
It's right now scheduled for the 21st.
21st?
I think what we'll end up doing is probably rescheduling till later. Be sure that, number one, because we want to be sure that you're here. Number two, it doesn't look like you're going to be done by the 21st.
Yeah, I'll let you know, but we're
Okay.
meeting Monday to hopefully wrap up at least the recommendation portion of it. As far as the report for the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee, that's another story.
Okay.
But I'll know more on Monday.
All right. Well, if you have to change it, I think that won't be an issue for that. Okay. All right, great. Any other committee reports? Okay. And, okay, let's moving on then to the item for Sewer and Solid Waste Enterprise Fund budget reviews. We did receive in our packets the other day the budgets for both solid waste and sewer. Kara, thank you for coming and welcome. We appreciate you come here. Yep, that's fine. And would you like to give an overview? And which one would you like to start first?
Sewer?
Okay, we'll start with sewer first and give an overview, and then after that, some questions. That's okay. All righty?
Perfect.
Great.
There is a small reduction in the percentage increase for sewer. There's a presentation with some goals and initiatives, but I'll go right into the budget if that's all right.
Sure. That'd be fine.
The salary, there's a slight reduction. We had retirement of one long-term employee that the replacement will be with a newer employee, so that number will be lower. The insurance, as elsewhere in the town budget, I'm sure you're hearing this in many places, has increased 17.8%. There's a slight decrease in utilities. I want to congratulate the Energy Department. They did some light bulb replacements and some other energy-saving items that created a small savings for the sewer department. There's a large 47% increase in repair and maintenance. We are trying to address a number of items of deferred maintenance. So I've tried to put some additional money there for work on the treatment plant. Professional services, there's a significant increase. We have our bills printed and sent out by the water company. That costs about $80,000 a year. This also includes the internet with Comcast. It also includes Koppelman and Page legal, as well as the water testing that we send off-site. And that's one item that we don't have an exact number for, because it's going to depend on the number of water samples that we have to take to make sure that we're meeting all of the guidelines for discharge into the groundwater disposal beds. The next significant increase is the insurances. Again, I'm sure you're seeing that with the other budgets in town. Supplies is increasing, again, for the same reason as the repair and maintenance, addressing deferred maintenance. Slight increase in travel. They are required to maintain licenses, and the licenses require continuing education credits, and they have to go off-island for that. Debt service is down slightly, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that. As you know, we have the Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan in process by Woodard and Curran, and the largest piece of the deliverable for the Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan is going to be a 20-year capital plan. And in preparation for that, this slight decrease is going to position us to be able to move forward with increasing our debt. I anticipate that it's going to be on the order of $200 million, about $10 million per year, if we were to keep everything on schedule. It's going to be a very, very, very significant increase to the sewer account. And the sewer planning work group has been created to review the CWMP and kind of vet it beforehand for the citizenry. And I think the biggest part of their contribution to this will be to prepare and hopefully champion a citizen kind of education, informational process to get that information out. The projects have not been outlined yet. We have the needs areas assessed, the areas that need to have sewer provided. We know where the existing sewer pipes are. In terms of the priority of needs, DEP is telling us that Nantucket is our #1 priority to address the marine estuaries plan that was done for the Nantucket Harbor. The good news that I'm happy to say today, we found out that DEP is willing to increase the capacity or the permitted volumes in our groundwater leaching beds at the Surfside plant. So we will be able to take Nantucket to the Surfside plant. That eliminates the need for a $45 million treatment plant in Nantucket and allows us to be able to install a series of pumps and pipes from Nantucket to Surfside. Originally, I believe it was budgeted at $65 million for the treatment plant as well as all the piping in Nantucket, and those numbers have been brought forward to 2013. They're on the order of $80 million. The reduction of the $45 million is less than 65, but it's still a very big number. And that will be probably transpire over a number of years.
It is a big development.
It is.
Congratulations.
It is. Thank you.
That's great.
I didn't hear that. I missed those numbers.
Roughly. These are very rough numbers at this point. But originally, the cost for Nantucket was $65 million for the treatment plant and the pipes. Those numbers have been brought forward to 2013 numbers on the order of 80 million. So if you eliminate the 45 million for the treatment plant, it's less than 65 million, but it's still, 35 million for Nantucket, which is still a very big number. And I guess
Is that all set?
Yep.
Ready for questions?
For questions.
Okay, great. Jim?
Could you go over again the difference between 14 and 15 on I guess professional services?
Yeah, that includes the water company costs for preparing and collecting the bills.
But you've had that this year.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
All right.
The Copeland and Page town council bills, their internet costs, and then the...
What's the 174,000? So, I mean, those are all expenses that you had in your base, and they may be going up, but what's the reconciliation between...
Of that
14 and
increase?
15? It's more than doubling, so...
You're going from 50 to 215.
I believe what happened, and I'd have to defer to Martin, I'm sure he'll have to go into the computer, but the 100,013, I think, was low, and I think that might be a carryover there.
It's 121 this year,
Right,
and you're going to 295.
right.
So, so you're saying that on a run rate basis, the 11 and 12, so they were kind of like a, well, anyway, so,
Would it help, Jim, if there was a breakdown of that we can
Well,
get later?
So you're saying that 11 and 12 are more like 15, and in 13, there may have been some difference in posting of expenses or something, or?
13 actuals were 46K
Yeah.
in the,
14 budget, 50K. Then it jumps to 215 this year.
I'm sorry, I must be looking at the wrong.
I'm looking at the
thing.
wrong.
it's
I'm looking at you.
53,100. There's two categories.
Well, I think the one Jim's looking at is the one on page,
Yeah, he's probably looking at
page
66,446.
I'm sorry, I completely forgot Woodard and Curran. That's the
Woodward
the
and Kearns
difference.
is the difference?
Yes.
Okay, now, let's be sure, I'm looking on page 4 of 14, under professional services, where it goes from 121, 200,000 for this fiscal 2014 to 295, 575. And I think that's what you're asking, Jim. Is that correct?
Yes.
And
I-
so we're
and I
already sure.
think that would be
From
Woodard and
100,000,
Curran.
And I think
130.
you're
What's-
looking at a different number.
Which would just, what
Page
account?
4.
Which
Page
account-
4.
Yeah, but.
On
just the
professional
account-
services.
the
Professional
account code.
services?
There is no code. It's professional services under, go back to page 4. This one, if you can see from here.
Yeah, no, I
That
I
one.
know
That's the
which
one we're
you're
talking about.
Yeah, the other one is even
Well, it could be,
more
but that's one,
difference.
let's be sure we're talking the same numbers, though, for right now. That's
So-
all. That's all I'm interested in at this point.
So we're
And then-
65 and,
So it went from an actual of 213 of 100,000 to a budget of 121 and 14 to a budget 295 and 15.
And it's also the way it was grouped to put all the professional services together.
you had-
It's from
so-
revolvers as well as from there's three separate sewer accounts.
Okay, so it's combined, okay. All right,
Okay.
that helps then.
So what we can do is give you, see, we probably should have done something over the other hand, but the way we've been working on the budget is, for sewer enterprise, as Kara said, they're internally divided into wastewater treatment, sewer collection and disposal, and sconset treatment. So you guys have all that as well, I think. but
Yeah.
you-
Right.
It's a
some-
combination.
summary sheet that I think you're looking at.
That's right, that's at page 4.
What
That's
we
correct.
have to do is look back at each one and see where each one.
And it breaks down into, yeah, okay.
Yeah, so.
And that's what you're talking about, where it breaks down. Okay.
but I guess is it, are you confident it's Woodard and Curran?
I
Yes.
don't think it's just what it is.
Well, is
I think
it,
so.
Just what we're including?
Did do, so it's $163,000 increase in decrease in 13 over 12. So 12, there was $163,000 more expenditure than current for wastewater consulting. That's what the inscription says.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
Then
okay,
that's where the big rate is coming.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
That's the
Big
explanation.
drop. I apologize.
no, that's fine, no, it's good that,
It was more into 12, it's less in 13.
But you're going back in 15 and putting it in. That's what I.
So that, we need to.
You went a little reconciliation.
understand the
Okay,
difference.
great, thank you.
all right. Did you want to say something, John?
Well, I don't understand the difference. You know, real simply, if you look at the summary, and it even looks more so if you look at in the detail, but if you look at the summary, you go from 100,000 in actual in 2013. You budget for 2014 121, and then it jumps up to 295, which is about $175,000 difference. You know,
I think the answer they gave was, they didn't have the expenditure in 13. They based 14 off of 13, which was probably a bust. And they've either in 14 or 15 gone back to the way they did in 2011 and 12.
And 12, right.
And as Chair mentioned also, there's $8,000 now that should is paying to the water company.
The water company.
It started last fiscal year in the last quarter. So starting 13 in the last quarter and 14, it's $8,000 we have to add there for cost associated with it.
Okay.
you mean in 2013, which is the actual number that we spent, apparently there was $175,000 worth of professional services that we didn't do or didn't have done. One could ask the question of, then why are we doing it if we can not do it in one year and therefore all of a sudden have to pick it up in another year? I mean, what I don't understand is what exactly we're talking about here.
We have
That's a
the
fair amount of shift.
we have the contract with Woodard and Curran. We have the contract with Woodard and Curran, the CWMP, and a lot of the day-to-day questioning has been billed to that, which is a capital capital account as opposed to the operating. So the CWMP will be completed. Actually, it was supposed to be December. It's going to be extended now to June. But the numbers prior to the CWMP, it was charged to an operating number, switched to the capital number for 13 and 14, and we'll be going back to an operating number.
And again,
So
and
the
now
buck-
maybe I'm changing.
buckets
So
are just going from
it's you mentioned the
capital.
capital. That's what was approved at last year's town meeting is reflected.
The
Here?
750,000. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
So they're using
Just follow-
another
I will,
bucket.
just-
I'm a little slow, but I'm
You'll get it. So yeah. All right. You guys set, David? I want to make sure these guys
They
are all
did
set
not
first. Wait a
spend
second.
it, they spent it, the resources were, the funds came from capital rather than operating expenses.
Right. David?
There's, two questions, Kara,
Okay.
and maybe the first one's to Martin. Actually, I think maybe both are to Martin. No, that's all right. You guys, finish your conversation now.
We're just trying to figure it out.
And actually, I'll ask Martin, would you mind coming to the mic too, since we're on, I forgot since we're on the TV, trying to change how we do things too, for the audience.
So, Martin, do you have a sense on year-to-date expenditures under professional services? The actual, the actuals to the first two quarters?
We could get that. We'll have to go
Okay. You have the other question? While he's
Yeah,
making
the
that?
second question I have is, if it cost you $80,000 to have the water company do your billing, and it started in the final quarter of the last fiscal year, the broader question, and it's not to you because you're not from the water company, but it may be appropriate for Libby, where did that additional revenue show up in the water company's financials? Because I don't remember Bob
He
talking.
mentioned it.
Did he mention it?
Yeah, he
Okay.
did. I think it was, I don't know if it was a dedicated line item.
I think it was a dedicated line item. We can look that up and David.
No, if he mentioned it and it's in
It
there,
ties
it's fine.
back.
It ties back. Okay.
Okay. Any luck on the first one? The actuals?
The actuals for, I apologize.
Oh, the actuals for professional services for the...
Year to date.
Year to
For
date.
that.
Okay.
Okay, so the question is why there was such a decrease between fiscal year 2012 to fiscal year 13?
That
No, we're
wasn't my
moving on.
question.
We're moving on from that.
Just what are the actuals
Year to
Year to
date
date.
for professional services.
through the second quarter?
For fiscal 14, I don't know. I'm gonna have to get back to you on that.
Okay.
I'm gonna email it tomorrow to the whole committee. I'm gonna do a year-to-date budget report and email it out. So
All right, so we'll get the actuals, you'll provide the actuals so far.
so far, yes.
Okay, great. That's fine. All right. Moving along, Cliff.
I was just confused on the, we talked about the debt service going down, and I was looking at the, I guess just the sewer enterprise wastewater treatment budget. And the debt service goes from 542 and 210 to 2,000,003 and 1,000,002. So that was a completely huge jump, right? That's up 326% and 488%.
If you go to the very last page, there's a debt amortization schedule,
Okay.
and the total sewer fund payments from 14 to 15 go down from 3.6 million to 3.55, a small amount. A lot of dollars, but a small percentage.
Oh, I see. So what was the actual, what does that represent then?
This is a total of all of the outstanding debt in the sewer. So every one of
On
the,
the last page you're talking about?
the very last page, yep.
All right. Well, so what was the enterprise fund, what was that a reflection of? Why did it, is that something that just kicked in where we finished?
Yep, as the debt ages, the balances, as it's retiring, reduce. So unless you add new debt, the debt will constantly decline.
Oh, I guess I'm still confused. It just, see what I'm saying on page 8?
Let's go, all right. Let's go. I'm looking at the last page. Hold on a
Yeah,
second.
just page 8.
Thanks.
And it says debt service principal, and it says 542, and then debt service interest 210, and then this year it's 2 million, and 1,000,002 on page 8.
Okay. Carrie, do you see that?
I think that's just one of the budgets. I don't think that's the
That's not
compilation
the
of all
whole-
three.
No.
And
I
when you-
think that's
okay.
where the
Just
issue.
wondering what that big jump is, why we...
It ties together.
It's based on adding or subtracting projects.
Okay.
So the best viewpoint of all of the debt would be the very last page,
Just trying to
all the
figure out
debt together.
The analogy of that.
Yeah, the budgets, one is strictly for Surfside wastewater treatment plant, one is for Sconset treatment plant, the other is for the collection system. So it could be the collection system, it could be Sconset, I'm not, I'd have to look closely.
Okay.
Okay.
Just trying to figure out, I guess we finished the project, and now it's all debt, and it's a big change. Anyway, go on.
Come and do. Further questions? Question, and then David.
Ken, I have a question on page 8. What's the difference between the sewer privilege fee and the sewer privilege? Is it interest? Is that INT fee?
Yep. For people who don't pay their privilege fee all at once when they get their sewer permit, they put it on their taxes. And when it gets put onto taxes, it's collected as principal and interest. So the privilege fee is the principal, and the privilege fee, INT, is the interest.
And what's the reason for the sort of fluctuations in that fee over the past few years.
It's,
And the jump
again,
this year.
the number of people added versus the number of people who have completed paying the privilege fee. It's a constant gyration between how many people continue. Some people, when they purchase, when they sell their property, even though the town doesn't require that it be paid off, many banks don't want to become second to the town's lien. Town's liens are always first.
Sure.
So a bank, before they give somebody a new mortgage, will require that that the privilege fee be paid off. So that particular year, we'll see a big jump in the payments because rather than paying it off for the 20 years, say they sell their house at year 13, the outstanding balance will be paid all at once.
Makes
That's
sense.
why it kind of goes up and down.
Thanks.
All set? David? You all set? Okay. Further, Craig?
Hi, Kara. A question on the sludge disposal cost.
Yes,
It was my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the sludge was used in the composting process?
it is.
So is that not an in-house cost, or is there actual...
Because they're enterprise funds, they're two different entities. If it was all general fund, there wouldn't need to be that change in hands. But because it's going from the sewer enterprise fund to the solid waste enterprise fund, there's a payment.
Okay, thank you.
John?
This is a general look at it. When I walk through and kind of keep track as I go through all of the expenses and all of the revenues, I looked at 2014 budget, and I would assume that you're going to do a lot better in 2014 than we budgeted. Simply because if you look at 2013 actual, which you didn't have at the time you budgeted for 2014, and you kind of say, all right, that's the closest actual experience we've had, it looks to me like you got $600,000 to $700,000 that's floating around there. You know what I mean?
And that all closes to our retained earnings.
So if you look at the bottom line, we were talking about having a deficit in 2014 of about $979,000, correct? And you were going to get that. Now, my guess is that that's going to be a little closer to $200,000 to $300,000 by the time you get done. Am I getting warm, or?
I'm sorry, I just asked Martin. I
trying to put
forgot
words in your mouth, I'm
the
just
retained earnings number. At the special town meeting in November, the one budget that didn't need to have the bottom line added to was the sewer, because we had taken in so much revenue that we exceeded our expenditures with the revenues. So when free cash was certified, it was certified at $1.618 million, and I anticipate that it would be within that same ballpark for the coming fiscal year, if not greater.
It's not, yeah, I'm just trying to get a sense of the operation, and because if you look at 2013, you look at 2014 budget, you look at 2015 budget, they're remarkably different, or actually 2015 budget is closer to 2013 actual than it is, in fact, 2014 budget. And I kind of assumed, looking at it, is that, well, you didn't have the experience close enough to and so it's a learning experience.
Yes.
But you've had now 6 months of experience on the FY 2014. My instincts tell me that at the end of the year, just looking at what you're doing, you're going to be a lot better off, bottom line, in 2014 than you had budgeted, to the tune of somewhere around $600,000 to $700,000.
I would agree that's probably accurate.
Okay, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, and
I haven't had a chance to look recently at the year-to-date, so I'm hesitating to say definitely yes, but...
Martin, could you review for us, I think this all ties into John's question, the the potential the transfer at the special town meeting, which we could not do because of the lack of a quorum.
There was a quorum requirement for that, which we didn't meet at the special town meeting, so we couldn't increase the budget. Otherwise, we would have increased the budget of sewer, because when retained earnings were certified, revenues were certified at a higher level than what was projected. So since we do adjustments to reduce budgets, we were going to do an adjustment to increase the sewer budget. But there was no quorum, so we couldn't do it. That's the only reason it wasn't done at special town meeting. I have an additional comment to make for discussion purposes. Do you want me to include retained earnings on the bottom of these presentations, on the bottom under the sheet, so you're aware of how much retained earnings are for future references? Because it keeps coming up as a question. And I have the numbers. I can include them on the bottom, so you can see what percentages are being used of them. Or
Yes, that would be.
And I'll resend all the documents for enterprise funds tomorrow to the commission with the retained earnings on the bottom.
Yes.
Okay.
Then that make it easier. Jim?
John, I don't know if this is your point, but there's an 11% increase between 2012 and 2013. So if you apply that to, if you project 2014 based on that, you're going to end up with actual of $6,449,000. So there's a, now if you look at the difference between 2011 and 2012, there's only 1% increase. So if you say they're, so their budget isn't that far off. If you think I think 11% between 12 and 13, it seems awful high. But if you're, so just, it's kind of like, what number do you want to pick?
Yeah, but Jim, it simply looks, if you look at them, if you look at 2013 actuals, you look at 2000, and that's actuals, you look at 2014 budget, you look at 2015 budget, you see a big differentiation. It's like a...
Well, the big change is from 12 to 13. That's an 11% increase.
Yeah,
so if you apply that same from 13 to 14, you're going to get $6,449,000 instead of $6,587,000, which isn't that far off.
Yeah, I didn't take it.
They really did a straight line for 2015.
Yeah, I'm just looking. I didn't go back to 12. I looked at just at 13, 14, and 15, and said. And then I looked at the difference. I looked at the detail and where the difference was in how they budgeted this year, and I could see where their budgeting was going back to 2013 actual as opposed to what they did in 2014, and that's why I said what I said. It's a matter of how what you see them doing with the numbers. I see the numbers in 2015 being a lot closer to 2013 actuals than I do the budget of 2014, and in every case, 2014 is up. So if you say to yourself, 2013 is the practical actual, then you and I think Kara believes that because her budgeting of 2015 is following a pattern there. Then you'd say that it looks like this year, 2014, we're going to do a lot better than we said, somewhere to the area of about $600,000. And I saw a nod on that. So now I'm not pinning it down to a number. I'm just saying in that general thing. That's what I was getting at.
Well, if that's the case, then their budget should be revised down.
In 2014?
15.
Why would we revise the budget down?
What you're saying is your
Well-
base is going to be lower than you expect.
The base is 2,000.
Hold on a second. We'll go back and forth. Excuse me. I think that, and one thing I find is very illuminating for me to see how different analysis for different minds can be done. So I want to commend you both on that. I think for our purposes now is that to come up with a consensus here or later or on the comfort level for this 15 budget. And I think all those comments apply to that. That's the way I see it. So I think it's different ways to skin a cat.
On the revenue side, I just want to point out that John is right. If you look at it, we very closely base fiscal year 15 on the actuals of fiscal year 13 for revenues.
Right.
For revenues.
Right.
And obviously, revenues drive the budgets for enterprise funds because we try to contain within these revenues the expenses. So,
Okay, thank you. John? Yep.
Yeah. The reason I always look at the previous year's budget, even though we're here primarily to talk about the 2015 budget, is because they're taking a hunk out of retained earnings, and the issue that I'm trying to get a feel of is going forward, how much you're going to take out of there. Well, you're not going to take out 900 and some thousand. You're going to take out quite a bit less than that, in my view. So therefore, I start taking a different look as I'm looking forward to the next year as far as, where you sit from a fiscal position. You can't ignore 2014 budget, or can you ignore 2013 when you're trying to do a 2015 budget? And that's why the questions come up from time to time about how you doing so far this year. Because depending on your situation, in this case, it looks to me like and I think you're saying that's where you are. You're going to do a lot better this year than you had budgeted. Now, part of that was going to be adjusted for in the special town meeting, which we couldn't do. I suspect not as much, though, is what I'm seeing. And that's important to know that going forward, because instead of whacking our retained earnings for 975, we may be whacking it for maybe 200 to 300. Big difference.
just want to make a note that the retained earnings used or budgeted in fiscal year 14 were done on the basis of actuals in fiscal year 12.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. So for the future year, obviously, if we get more revenues, they're going to go to retained earnings for the sewer. So they're not going away. It's just.
Jim?
I'm not commenting on John's, but I don't think we want to use, padding, I shouldn't say padding budget, having the budget as a way, expense budget as a way to create retained earnings. I think we want to project what we expect the expenses to be. And I think if, hearing John's scenario of the give back, maybe these expenses are a little, they could be a little more aggressive. They could be lower. I don't know if anybody, that's just a comment.
Thanks. Kara?
I have to agree with Jim. It would be great to be able to set the expense budget based on the revenues in conjunction with the certified retained earnings. But given the fact that I am facing a very, very large capital budget, I am trying to keep the expenses at this point to the lowest amount that I can, so that we can start trying to build some retained earnings to try to add to the future budgets.
Okay, thank you. Oh, follow up and then,
So
okay.
what I just heard was that these expenses are higher than we expect to have, and we're doing that on purpose so we can generate retained earnings.
No.
Okay. All right. Okay.
That's good.
Okay. So tell me where I'm wrong.
Can I try to finish
Sure.
it?
No, this is
I think a little bit.
This is a good discussion.
The retained earnings that John is speaking of was because of revenue that came in more than expected,
Than
not
budgeted,
expenses
right.
that weren't spent.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Which will tie back to, and because, again, now I'm not the financial mind these guys are, is that at this town meeting, will we do a transfer back for DOR that they wanted us to do, what we intended to do in the fall? Will we adjust our revenues numbers? We don't have to.
No.
No.
Okay.
It's over.
Okay.
I just want to make a note also, retained earnings, as is with the case with free cash, goes away at the end of the fiscal year until it's recertified. So you don't expect to have it on 1st of July.
Okay.
It closes to zero, then it gets recertified. It's just we expect, that's just an expectation, that it's going to be more due to the fact that we can't adjust the budget for revenues.
Okay. All right. Tim?
Well, my question it kind of goes along, Mr. Chairman, the lines of thinking you had. I thought we had a caution from DOR that we were actually collecting too much revenue. So I was trying to figure out how do I track that into this budget and see how we accounted for that.
At the special town meeting, What we were going to do is to take excess revenues to put into, we have line items in both the sewer and the solid waste of unallocated revenues, and it's an emergency fund. We fortunately, knock on wood, have not had any emergencies that have been extremely costly, but if we were to have C Street Pump Station go down, and we had to spend $100,000, $200,000, $300,000, we wouldn't have anything in the current budget that we could use to pay for that. So by having a small amount in that unallocated expenses, it would allow us to address smaller emergencies. So that's what we were going to have to do. We were going to have to take excess revenues and allocate it for reserves.
But doesn't that go right back to Jim's point? We're actually collecting money in anticipation of projects as opposed to, I think that's what you asked, Jim, isn't it?
I was only talking about expenses and making sure they weren't overstated as a way to generate retained earnings.
Yeah.
I wasn't talking about the revenue side at all.
John?
You mentioned utilities, but I went to the electricity because I thought that sort of jumped out at me a little bit. It looks like, and I think you alluded to it in your beginning, but I just wanted to understand that a little bit better. It looks like we've done a pretty good job of at least controlling that expense. And you said that was based on some things that you have done. And I'd just like to know what those things are.
The biggest piece was the light bulbs were changed to energy-efficient light bulbs.
Really?
Our biggest expense at the treatment plants, anyway, are blowers, and we are having those evaluated to see if we could reduce the size or make them more efficient, but there's going to be a cost to doing any of that work. So we've tried to catch the less expensive items first.
And for those, to what I was talking about before, when you look at electricity in 2013-14 budget and 15 budget, that's a classic of what I was talking about before. In other words, the 14 budget, you're not going to spend $442,000 on electricity in 2014, because when 2013 came in at 286, you said, "Oops," and therefore you budgeted for 330, which one might argue about the fact that that's a fairly decent jump, but I'm assuming that's based, you've done your check on rates and so forth, and you've kind of calculated that.
If you're looking at the 66440 department,
Yes.
Yeah.
that's Surfside Wastewater Treatment Plant, and that actually, the fiscal 12, we actually had a credit from the electric company that year. The electric company discovered that we were being charged at the wrong rate, so they gave us a large credit, which is why that one particular year
How
is
much was that
so low.
credit?
Couple $100,000.
You had mentioned that before, I think, last year.
I mean, we went from 381 to
Yeah, I just didn't remember.
No, you could not. Exactly.
That makes more sense.
Further questions?
Oh, yeah.
You have it?
Yeah, I can't find it now, but I found it earlier today. Workman's comp. There was something about you went to zero on that or something like that. And I just
57502 is the account.
Oh, is it?
I couldn't find it.
5.56 to 0.
We did have one gentleman on Workman's Comp who left the town's employ. I just checking to see if that's what that was related to.
Is that on page 11, like the last item on page 11? Insurance workman's comp, or is that? No, that's Sconset. That's the wrong one. That's Sconset.
That's what they're asking for.
Oh, here it is. It's on page 10.
10?
Yeah, I think. On the third one from the bottom on page 10, is that the one?
It's because we put it all on source.
No.
No, it's still not.
I couldn't find it. Oh, well.
Well, it's on, I'm not sure the number, but 57502 was 27204. You budgeted for this year 25,615 and aren't budgeting anything for the next year for 215. It's gone to zero. So I don't know if it's allocated to another account but you should be allocating the workman's comp insurance
I believe that's related to the fact that we had a long-term workman's comp case that was settled, so we don't have those payments anymore.
But isn't that insurance? Or are you self-insured?
We're self-insured.
So,
It says insurance, so.
I guess that's
So
what
if you
workman's comp.
don't, if you don't have a claim, your budget, you're assuming you're not going to have any claims this year.
I believe that's how it goes.
All set, Jim?
Yes.
John, and then Craig?
well, it took me a minute to find it. And it does go to zero, and I get a little nervous when something goes from, there's a pattern over a period of time, and then all of a sudden it goes to zero. And it's just, Jim asked the $64,000 question. You mean to say you're not going to, you're going to have a good, in 2015, we're miraculously not going to have anybody with that.
It just reflects the fact that that particular case was settled.
We also have the $10,000 expenditure to the claim deductible budgeted, which wasn't budgeted before. So there is some contingency there.
I know, like to do it that way.
Craig?
Under the sewer privilege fee, it looks like a large increase from last year to this year. If I'm reading that right, that there's going to be an uptick from 130,000 to 425,000. If there's a particular reason why there's such a large, I'm assuming it's an increase.
2013 is too.
It's on page 8.
That's
Like the
right at the
fourth,
top.
right at the top, like
Just
fourth one
mirror
down.
what's in 13.
Craig, look at 2013.
Yeah, let's go with that. I mean, there has been a increase from 30 to 130 to 425.
So there's lots of fluctuations.
Let's see, it looks like they budgeted there.
That's a good question.
It looks like you budgeted your 14 based on your 12 actual.
13 actual.
13 actual.
13 actual.
Okay.
No, 12 actual is 130.
The number in 15 mirrors what was the actual in 13, and
Okay.
the difference from 13 to 14 was the addition of almost 70 privilege fees that were signed up. So that's where that change in number
So
came
an
from.
additional 70.
Yes.
I got a question, and I apologize going back to it. But the revenue, going back to John's point about the excess revenue and the DOR cautioning us last fall, I'm just not clear on why we don't have to adjust at this upcoming town meeting when we will have a quorum. Why does that just drop out? I'm
The
just
places
not clear.
that have to be adjusted at the special town meeting are when the revenues are not sufficient for the expenditures. In this case, it's the other way
It's
around.
the other way around, right. And, okay, so that's, and that doesn't apply at an annual
Right,
then?
right.
Okay. Does everybody get that?
It also had to do with setting the tax rate.
For the special, right, we had to do that.
Which is why it had to be a
Had to
special.
be special.
We set
Okay.
the tax rate, now we set the tax rate, so.
650 grand.
Okay.
Do better.
I just want to be sure. It seems like,
And DOR
as I
approved
can
it
tell.
without having to change that time.
and they do it ahead of, Jim? Okay.
I'm a little slow in the uptake. I've just figured out that the revenue for 14 is based on 12 actual. All the columns are the same. All the
Yes.
numbers are
Right.
the same. And 15 is all budget, all the numbers are from 13.
13 actual.
So,
Okay.
and I'm sure the rest of the group saw that. I just didn't see it.
Yes.
That, just him.
I made that point earlier because we want to base revenues. We have to be really careful with revenues, especially for DOR purposes. We cannot just
Right.
increase
No,
revenues
we're very sensitive
because we think that there are trends that show that they're increasing. We very, very closely base them on actuals. That way you can show that you've had these actuals over the course of a year.
Okay, so we're okay. The big thing is we're okay going into to the spring. That's really what it's come down for me.
David, you have a-
Sort of a general comment, or not sort of, it is a general comment. It seems to me that we should be doing budget projections off of the first half year's actuals. And most of the expenses that we run ought to be reasonably fixed and such that you can do a projection, so that we start to eliminate the need to look back 2 years and basically have a budget that seems like it's somewhat blind.
The problem with sewer is that it's based on users, and obviously our summertime population is significantly higher than our year-round population, so we wouldn't have an accurate number off of a half a year, which is why we go back to the full year.
I actually, with all due respect, would disagree. You've got prior year's experience with actuals where you have monthly information that you could do the projections could be done. And this is, doing these projections is a fairly standard set of activities in other parts of the world. So we've got the data. We ought to know, what the seasonality looks like, so that we could move from, looking at budgets that are maybe almost 2 years old when you start to put them together. This is not a comment that only applies here. It's a broader question, which is, as the town moves forward in dealing with its finance department, it seems to me that we ought to be looking at much more real-time data rather than always looking at a budget and trying to, see whether things are real or not real based upon, quote, budgets.
That would mean the town meeting would have to be somewhere in May or June.
No.
Because, no, let me finish, I'm sorry. If you want to wait for trends for the first half year, which ends December 31st, we would be starting the budget process in January, which means we send the budgets, departments review them, so by the time we get back to you, it should be March or April. So that pushes the town meeting to June. That is one of the reasons. And I agree we can work with trends, we can do the first half year of years and look at it, but it's going to push back the process of budget creation and redistributing it, and then the departments obviously reviewing them. We have to meet with them, discuss.
Jim, David, then Jim.
Yeah, I'm not talking about doing trends. I'm talking about using your actuals to do your budget projections. And I think it's a dynamic process that wouldn't necessarily mess up our timing. It's a fair amount of work to get it set up. I'm cognizant of that. But once you've got yourself set and once you understand what's happened in 12 and 13, which you clearly do, now we're talking about looking at it, monthly, so you can figure out your seasonal implications. Salary cost for the course of the year is a fixed amount, and you know exactly what goes out every single month, and you know what you have to pay for the bulk of the major expenses. Along comes some variable expenses, like you don't know when the bills are going to come in from Woodard and Currency. You don't know in what month that necessarily is going to get recorded. So there are some things that might be more variable in the course of the year in terms of timing. But it would seem on the expense side, you could come to a pretty good number, which I think gets to some of the issues that Jim's talking about, and we've seen elsewhere, airport the other day, which is, what's the real dynamic that's going on here? It's not going to happen this year, I understand that, but I think it's as the finance department evolves and goes forward, it would be clearly the probably a much better practice to be able to work off of real, real numbers.
Oh, sure.
Really quick, we agree, and I think we do look at what the actual is coming out. We also are cognizant of the DOR issue of you can't raise the revenues more than what you've got in the report. And we have had some discussion on the side as a result of the airport about maybe meeting again with DOR to revisit that whole thing, because the airport is a little bit volatile in that way. Maybe sewer might be a little bit as well. But I think we understand here what you're saying, that things ought to be a little more current. And sometimes there's, the one-time odd thing that happens, and sometimes it's more, yeah.
Jim, then John.
All my comments are only on expense management. I'm not talking about the revenue at all. But you've got a $6.6 million enterprise, and you can, and to get ready for your next year's budget, you could start doing monthly projections, expense projections now. You could be doing quarterly expense projections. You could be, to me, it's a little flying blind if you don't, you could be hit in the fourth quarter for something that you may not have gotten, you don't have enough money set aside for. So, but if you've been doing projections every month or every quarter, you'd be better prepared to know what those were. And this isn't just for this department, it's for really everything. That's just the way I think.
I agree, but aren't we doing quarterly, aren't the enterprise departments doing quarterly reports to the Board of Selectmen?
Yes.
Okay, now, I'm going to make a leap here that what you're saying, Jim, is part of those quarterly reports, or is that something different?
Well, if you're doing that and you're using that to make judicious decisions about expense management, then that's great. I think that's what's happening.
Okay. John?
Yeah, this is a classic budgeting approach, which is you hear people talk about a first pass, second pass, third pass.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
You get your basic budget, everything nailed down. You do this before the end of the year because of timing. You can't get all that work done after, or we'd have to extend the thing. You get everything done. The issue is then about the first week in January, and I've done this so many years. All right, you really look at you're panning. You're trying to get those books closed so you can look at your details for the first 6 months of that fiscal year. You look at that when you get it. You look at it carefully and you tweak. You don't reinvent the wheel, but it allows you to take a look at certain individual items, and it may only be a half a dozen items, but it allows you to look at that and say, the reality is the last 6 months, this is what we've done, which is a lot better or a lot worse than what we did in 2013, and we need to tweak the budget. So how long does it take you to tweak it? Not that long. It's a click of the mouse, as they used to say. So I don't think you're talking about extending things a lot. Maybe a little bit, but not a lot. But I think that would make the reading of what we're looking at could make it a lot more beneficial for everybody if we're looking at something and we know that inherent in here is some influence of the experience of the last 6 months.
And I know Libby and Martin and Deb are the choir. That's all they're doing right now is reviewing budgets and so forth.
So I think the comments are so noted.
I agree on the expense side. On the revenue side, though, you have to be aware that we have to budget the revenues on the basis of the previous year.
DOR rules, correct?
Yes. If you want us to tweak revenues on the basis of the first 6 months, which affects obviously the amount of the expenses because we are presenting a balanced budget for the most part, or that's the purpose of the whole budgeting process, that can be done. Expenses can be looked upon, but revenues, I don't think we can tweak those on the basis of the first 6 months. We haven't heard otherwise, at least.
Clip?
Just kind of an accounting question. I know the sewer privilege fee has been inconsistent due to the economy, but I thought when we collected more than we were supposed to collect, we were putting it in a reserve fund. Is that reflected somewhere in here? Because it just seems to be added into the...
It's a separate calculation. Finance does have the retained earnings split with the privilege fees separated out from from other revenues.
Yeah, it's an account,
And it's more,
stabilization fund somewhere.
it's not a separate account per se. It's all retained earnings, but it's divided into, same pocket, two sides of the pocket.
Okay. But we just seem to divvy up our retained earnings at the end of the year and use it for different things. I'm wondering where that line is that tells me how much money's left or extra. Anyway.
It's a calculation that's done on the side in finance.
Is that information that is available? Is that something, I'm really asking you, Martin or Deb, is that something we can get that's available?
Yeah, I can check tomorrow with Bob. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
All right, so if we can get that clip, we'll get that out. Okay. David, and then John?
Yeah, Martin, back to your comment on revenues. I actually, I think projecting and keeping on top of revenue for an enterprise fund is probably a lot more significant and important than the expenses. Again, I think the expenses are probably relatively fixed over the short run on most of the enterprise funds.
Well, especially as you pointed out, the payroll, yes.
Yeah. And
The
so
personnel.
on the revenue side, I mean, I would think across the town, and I suspect you've got the indicators already, whether you're going to slip on revenue from what you did in June of last year or whatever, so that we're not caught short on the revenue side. So again, I think that, doing the projections and running and keeping track of those actuals and then a projection off of prior history and then a rational look to say, okay, does this make sense based upon what we think is happening?
No, I agree, which I was actually thinking about it as the discussion was going on. For next year's budget, if that's the preference of the committee, we can have a year-to-date column for fiscal year. It's going to be fiscal year, obviously, 15 for the budget in 16, and you're going to have year-to-date budget as of December 31st. And if that's something that you want to add to that's easily done. And then we can look at trends, obviously. Enterprise funds to present to the Board of Selectmen quarterly, and trends are discussed at these meetings, and general fund does as well, actually. So
My first answer on that is at the end of after town meeting is over, the committee has met and has made recommendations for the next year. I would think that, I would hope we would do that again, and then we have this discussion at that time, because there may be other items to do and look at a more of a holistic approach.
it's obviously, yes, it's an evolving process.
That
budgeting
certainly
is...
sounds like a good suggestion, though.
Yes.
On that.
I mean,
It
if-
may help address your concerns, too.
I don't know what the opinion of the committee is on the new format, but it's been well received from the most departments. It's
For
been
one committee member, I commend you and the
Well, not-
whole finance department. I think that it's much better.
It's everybody's contribution. The departments have actually done their presentations, but I mean, I'm just questioning in general whether it's a format that works informationally and for discussion purposes.
Yeah. When you look at the payroll, I look at 2013 to 2014 budget, okay, comparison, and you're showing a drop in payroll, but you're not, I don't think you have a drop in headcount, if I'm not mistaken.
That was because we had a long-term employee who was here over 30 years retire, and we're replacing him with a newer employee.
That big a difference?
A general note, there is no increases for COLA incorporated into the budget because there are ongoing union negotiations which finish and they expire as of the end of fiscal year 14. So there are ongoing negotiations with all unions.
So there's nothing in here?
There's nothing in there for increases. It's all in contractual obligations for the general fund, and we're going to add it on later. So that's going to be an addition, which you're going to get once negotiations are complete. We cannot add here a line item of contractual obligations, because once that's done, unions assume that they're entitled to that amount.
Thank you. Christie?
Kara, under the item sludge disposal costs, Is that, how much of that is processing it, and how much is out of maybe contracts paying haulers? Do we pay haulers to move that?
No, we do it ourselves.
We do, okay.
There is a sludge line item in solid waste. I can tell you how much it costs.
No, you know what, I have that. I just,
Oh, okay.
if there was the addition of haulers in
No, we
that
don't.
cost,
No, we do it
I
ourselves.
was going to ask about that, okay. That's fine.
Okay. And also, I guess one thing I'd like to add in at this time is that, as you were well aware on the warrant this year, there'll be some citizen warrant articles and some Board of Selectmen articles and planning articles for increasing the number of sewer users. And Mr. Atherton, the chairman of the Board of Selectmen, has requested that be quantitated, that difference in capacity be quantitated. And so I think that all will be helpful for this committee, too, when we're deliberating on that. Further questions on sewers? Okay, thank you, sewers. Now we'll move over to solid waste, which we also received the other day at the same mailing. And did you want to give an overview?
Sure.
Great, thank you. Very good.
A couple of changes in the solid waste fund. One is that the Board of Selectmen voted in March to have a fee holiday for a number of bulky waste items. To date, it's about $200,000 that we've not received in fees for that. So that has a small impact on the revenues. Looking at the budget sheet, we only have one part-time employee at Take It or Leave It. The rest of the employees at the landfill are all waste options employees. So as you'll see, our payroll line item is very small. Again, in this budget, as in the sewer, the insurance line item has gone up. Our utilities item gone down by the amount that we've saved due, again, to replacement of light bulbs and so forth. Our repairs and maintenance has gone up 247%, but it's actually $2,000. It's an aging facility, and I was uncomfortable with the smaller amount, so that's been increased. Professional services is our largest line item. There's a 3% increase, but that is mostly what we pay to Waste Options for the operations of the facility. The recyclable number is the cost for getting recyclables off island. The freight is to get the C&D off island. The hazardous waste is the Saturday hazardous waste collection that we have 6 times a year. And debt service-wise, we have very, very little that's bonded in this particular budget. One of the things that I want to highlight about this budget is the change that we are actually already beginning to experience due to the opening of the Reese transfer facility. Initially, Reese's were taking just their own waste. They are now taking their own clients, and the following month, probably February, March, they'll be taking people, just general disposal. And we looked at the percentage of C&D that Reese had been bringing in. It's about 20%. And Santos is a client of Reese's, and they bring in a little over 20%. So we expect that there might be at least a 25% reduction in the amount of C&D that we get at the facility. So we have Libby and Town Council George Aronson and I have been discussing for at least the last year, feels like longer, a change to the contract with Waste Options for the way that payments are made for C&D. I know we've talked a lot in the past about how most of the funds for the solid waste facility have been generated by C&D, There's obviously no charge for homeowners to bring their waste in, and there's a commercial fee that's paid by inns and stores that contributes a small amount to the revenues for, I shouldn't say small amount, another amount to the revenues for the solid waste facility. So we are in the process of working with Town Council and Waste Options Council to renegotiate that section of the contract that talks about C&D. The Board of Selectmen will be having an executive session to discuss that, and we hope to be able to bring that forward once that's been vetted through the Board of Selectmen and voted on.
Thank you. Do you, just a second, did you anticipate a date on when negotiations will conclude?
Would have been nice before we started, but
Right.
I would say a couple months.
A couple of months?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Jim?
So I heard you say that, was it 20% of your C&D was Reese and 20% was Santos?
Yes.
So that's 40%?
I'm sorry. The total came to 25%.
Oh, okay.
I misspoke. It was, I'm sorry.
All right, so
Totally
25.
wrong. 13 and 12.
Oh,
It's
okay.
25%. Sorry. Sorry. Too many numbers.
So more than just an observation, so we were pricing ourselves out of the market responded, we now have a competitor, and so now and we purposely, policy-wise, made the decision as a town to fund a lot of the operations through C&D to mitigate the cost to the taxpayer. So now we have a competitor in who's taken that ability away from us, and now we're going to reduce our rates to be more competitive and put it on the taxpayer, theoretically.
Added burden to the taxpayer.
But
And still
the
have-
discussions that we've had with their council and town council, we hope to mitigate a lot of that.
Right.
But can't go into that in detail.
Yeah.
John, then Craig?
Yeah, I don't see that being reflected in your revenue, though. You know, and see,
No,
that's
at the
I had
time-
that as a question early on before you even, you know, when I looked at it today, this morning, I said, knowing what's going on in the town and so forth, but I didn't see it reflected here.
At the time we were estimating revenues was the August, September timeframe, and this development in the contract is only in the last 2 days. I don't think Martin even realizes that we're even thinking about that yet.
Well, it would seem to me that this is what we're getting at before, and this is a big enough issue. It could have a big enough impact, at least, on the budget, where what I call tweaking, this would be a tweak with a club, but tweaking needs to be done at this point, so that what we're looking at going into town meeting, it would be significantly different than
Yeah,
what we're looking
and-
at today.
And just was it yesterday, Wednesday, Libby and George Aronson, John Giorgio and I discussed exactly that. And George and I are working on trying to estimate what we expect we will be bringing in and what the effect will be on the revenues. So I fully expect to be back to you with that.
Okay, so
But
you're...
as of
okay.
yesterday is when we
Gotcha.
developed
So it's
this.
still a moving target. Craig?
Yep, gotcha.
Do we know what the rate that Reese charges for their C&D?
No, I don't. I don't.
'Cause I would imagine if
It's
now-
less.
Oh, certainly, and I guess the danger could be that 25% that's now going there, that could even be a larger number when others
Could
find out
possibly.
about it.
Could possibly, but as I said, that's what the change in the contract is going to attempt to mitigate.
Now, Kara, to be clear, when we'll call it updating the revenue number, will we also be updating the expenses? Because I'm assuming the revenue is going to be lower, and so will the expenses from the amount that paid out the waste options?
Yes,
Is that a fair assumption?
yes. What we
But
have-
at the same
what we
time,
have
freight costs will go down.
will change.
So they budget for freight, so freight costs should go down. So it won't be the full delta.
Yes. Right.
Or it won't be the full.
Full thing. But it'd be, I mean, to me, yeah, I'll be waiting with bated breath on this. So,
It all
yeah.
depends on how that negotiation goes forward, so again, it's a moving target.
Good luck. I mean, that's tricky. Cliff?
Yeah, one of the things we talked least about, I think, is the landfill. And I don't know if there's somehow you could paraphrase from where we've come to where we've been to where we're going, and so we could understand better how everything works out there and how the contracts initially started 15 years ago to how it's morphed into what it is now, I guess.
I think we would have to set aside a day.
I was going to say, yeah.
Unfortunately.
Like this thick.
Very brief, probably with a lot of details left out in the nutshell. The contract was developed a number of years ago, almost 15 now, and there's been a lot of developments and improvements in how we dispose of our waste over that period of time, but there's been a lot of bumps along the road as well, and we started mining. We got the compost facility underway. It's starting to show a lot of wear and tear, and the maintenance schedule supposedly being kept up by waste auctions. The C&D building burned down. They're in the process of building, they've got a new one built. We've been open yet or anything. Meanwhile, that's caused the other building, that fabric
Air handling.
to be used for a lot of the waste handling, which is what it was meant for, so there's issues there. Reese has opened now. That is definitely direct competition with the town, and we have talked quite a bit about, okay, what's the Reese rate? Should we make ours a little lower than that? But then we're still going to lose money because the volume is down a few years ago because of the economy. It's back up some, but there's a diversion that we don't know exactly how it's going to work yet, but I think we should count on some.
Right. It's tricky. Cliff?
So do we ever revisit the overall picture of the landfill and the composting and what direction we went in, and are we in the same direction, or should we change directions? Or?
Well, we are regularly discussing now with our solid waste consultant, and he is also looking at some waste to energy technology that he's going to be reporting to the board about next week at the workshop meeting. I'll want to attend to hear that, and we'll be able to watch it here as well.
And we have 10 years left on our contract, so we are here for 10 years.
Right. That we know.
Just not sure what, 10
So I
years
think
of what.
the other thing we have talked a little bit about is maybe we ought to keep on mining and actually, at some point over time, go so far as to empty out the line landfill cells, so we don't even have line landfill cells anymore, and not need to build new ones. That's going to be an ongoing, growing expense, but it might be something that is more environmentally responsible, possibly, than what we're doing now, and it makes us keep getting rid of the waste rather than keeping it.
In the old days, you burned it and dumped it in a pond, and now that's gone, and we're just getting more and more environmentally responsible as the regulations require.
There are a lot of issues going on here at landfill that are under some discussion with the solid waste consultant, and we are going to need to figure out in the next, year or two, where are we going?
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Tim?
Well, I'd just like to say, on the record, it's very unfortunate that we're here talking about a revenue shortfall with a diversion of C&D, because we did it to ourselves. I think this is, I'm so heartbroken that this is the case. The taxpayers of Nantucket went out, solved a problem that DEP had a gun to the town's head to fix, and then we gave away the revenue stream to a competitor. I'm heartbroken that we're in this situation. And I'll just leave it at that. The good comment I wanted to make, and this came out of the sewer work group last week, if there is a silver lining, the pollutants in Long Pond have been reduced by 40%. So there is a silver lining to this. The runoff from the landfill, according to the consultants that have been hired by the board, have been reduced by 40% in Long Pond. So that's a great thing. We should be proud of that. But as far as the revenue shortfall, I believe the town manager predicted this would happen, and here we are, wondering like, oh, gee, what happened? facility.
Thank you. Before we get to other questions, I know we got to start asking questions. Did you want to do any more of your presentation?
No,
or you're all
I'm
set?
all set.
Okay, great. How about Christy, David, and John?
I just wanted to know, do you know if we are also competing with a recycling facility? And I know out back at the waste option, there's piles of, metal and tires and brush. Is that also is that at the Reese facility as well? Is it a full-fledged?
I believe it's a full transfer station.
Okay.
Yeah.
All set? David?
I have a general comment, so if we have specifics, I'll just hold to John.
Sure.
Go ahead.
John?
The mining, we have in the past capitalized it and expensed it. This year we are expensing it. What's the thought process? What is the thought process we go through between expensing versus capitalization of that particular project?
I don't know what you mean. What do you mean capitalizing versus expense?
Well, it's a capital expenditure.
It's been treated as a capital item before the capital program committee, but I'm glad you raised land for mine, because that expense actually is paid for out of the general fund. Not even paid out of this fund.
It's never been capitalized.
I don't know what you're meaning by capitalized.
It's paid.
How about this? It's never been appropriated. I think Libby's absolutely correct. It's been an appropriation request for $500,000, $500,000 at various times.
Between 500 and 700
For various years for mining expense. So I think the question is has it been appropriated and used from a capital?
It's always been a general fund subsidy.
Okay. But everything comes from the general.
You have it in line item 70433, 49703. So if you look at it, that's the history of it, that's how it's growing, you can take a look there.
Yeah, let me
And
find
it's
out.
described as a subsidy because it comes from the general.
And the mining program was a 5-year program that it ends this year. And we have just met in the last couple of months with DEP to get approval to mine for another 5 years.
Okay, great. Craig and then Tim.
Yeah, I have a question with the, you mentioned the fee holiday for the bulky items, and it was a cost of roughly $200,000. Is there a subsequent reduction in the amount that we spent for the illegal dumping to go out and pick up couches off the moors? Is there any way to identify?
We picked that up during the day, so it created additional time for us to do other things. There has been less. The Conservation Foundation has noticed that there's less. The Land Bank has noticed that there's less. So there's anecdotal evidence that it has improved that situation.
So is it fair to say, or can you say that of that $200,000 that it cost, or that we lost as revenue, is that made up elsewhere by spending less manpower go out and pick up that stuff? Is there any way
I don't know that you can quantify it in that way, because it's all done on regular workday time. So it's actually increased our ability to do other things.
Sure. Good. Tim and then John.
I just wanted to make a plug for the mining program, because I think that the one thing we should all remember as Finance Committee members is if we didn't mine and shrink the size of the hill, we'd have to close and cap it. And so
Absolutely.
as we shrink the acreage down,
Oh, no, that's a big thing.
our closing costs are actually going down. I don't know if it's one for one, but it's a significant reduction.
George has developed the numbers for that, and I can provide that to the board if you'd like.
I appreciate that, Kara, because I wouldn't want us to lose sight of the fact that we picked up an expense without a savings.
Yeah, thank you. We would like that.
Significant.
Yeah.
John?
Yeah, besides, capping is a questionable environmental process anyway across the country, not necessarily in Massachusetts, but in other states, they've gone away from capping. Okay? So that even adds to that. What I was getting at is that, and I couldn't find it at the time, if you look at landfill mining for 2011, it was an expense item. 2012 was an expense item. In 2013, it was zero on the expense column. at least on the sheet that you gave us. And therefore, I'm just made an assumption that that was probably capitalized at that time, because it wasn't on an expense item.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I don't know why it's 0 in 13. We should check that.
I guess I shouldn't assume.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not finished with it.
Oh, okay, John is another one.
No, I want to get an answer.
May I make a comment about this?
Oh, sure, yeah, while they're looking.
So I think
Go ahead.
part of the issue is that some of us, all the money comes from the general fund.
Of course.
Then there's expenses and capital, all come from the general fund. Some of us think in terms of a capitalized asset or an expense line item, which would be on this report. So when we don't see it on here, we're assuming that it's capitalized. Of course, it all comes from the same general fund. Right?
No.
No.
For capital, by and large, we borrow for it, okay? You don't take it out of the general fund.
This
okay?
wasn't borrowed.
Well,
this definitely wasn't borrowed.
but the point, yeah, so the distinction,
But we don't borrow.
No, this wasn't borrowed. I know
You-
you're saying.
you could.
You could, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
and you could amortize it over a period of time, which some people think is not a bad idea.
Not in this case. Waiting on, see if we can get that answer for you.
But we fund capital out of free cash.
That's correct. That's what, that's the way, that's what's.
So we don't borrow, we have capital overrides for certain projects, but we've not borrowed money for.
Something like this.
For something like this, so.
Years. Right. That's correct. Martin?
If you can see on the bottom, these three are capital accounts. They are not part of the expense budget, so I'm going to check why are they showing
Get
it.
back to us on that?
Yes, I will,
Okay.
tomorrow, yes.
All right, great. All right. Christie?
Ken, with the land fee income, is that anything that goes over the scale?
That's on page 8, the top one on page 8.
I believe so. There's tipping fees, and then there's income, maybe the commercial fee that's collected through the tax collector's office.
So tipping fee is the scale?
Tipping fee is the scale. Yeah, land fee income is the commercial charges that are collected through the tax collector.
Okay. Are you expecting it's level, that it's not going to go up or down?
For budgeting purposes, DOR has typically looks at something like that, looks to us to have us level fund it. So I believe that's where that's coming from.
Or the previous year. Isn't the previous year, I'm assuming?
Yeah, it's previous, but that's, again, something that we need to revisit, because I think we're going to see a reduction there.
Right, because of this, right. Yeah. What we just talked about.
Although there's been somewhat of a volume increase also, but again,
The-
it hasn't fully impacted.
There had been a drop since 2008, and we're seeing it come back up again. So there's a little bit of that balancing going on.
Further question? Tim?
Here, I just have one question on electricity. I didn't ask it when we were doing the sewer enterprise fund, but it's germane to both landfill and sewer. We talked a few years ago at the finance committee about maybe, clearly these two facilities are our largest consumers on the island. And one of the things we talked about is off-peak running of a lot of equipment because the electricity cost is so much cheaper. Have we made any progress going in that direction?
We did look at that. For the landfill, our, especially the Sconset plant is only manned during the day, so it's only run during the day, which would preclude being able to run off-peak. The Surfside plant is a continuous facility, so there's no opportunity to shut it off and turn it on. And the composter runs constantly as well. It takes the waste 4 to 5 days to go through the digester, and that's also run continuously. So because of the nature of the work that's done at each one of those locations, they need to be run continuously.
Okay.
Thank you.
Further question?
I've got a question on the sewer that I didn't answer.
Why don't we do all done with this?
Yep.
Okay. further questions or comments?
Well, I'd just make a comment, Mr. Chairman. I'm excited to hear what Libby mentioned about the consultant and some energy alternatives that might be there, because the electricity costs here are huge. So anything that we can do is pretty exciting, actually.
Yeah, it is. It's actually moved along even a little bit more than I think George sort of thought initially. So, we'll run more and more.
David?
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. David?
So a general comment, and I was going to actually bring this up after we're done with our business as an item that's come forward, but it seems like perhaps it's an appropriate time as we talk about the C&D waste. This is a problem that we all knew about, potentially was going to happen a year or so when they started down the permitting process line. And maybe a sort of a policy thing to the board, but is there something that we could do in the form of asking that impact analysis be done? And we've got, the Board of Health or whoever heard the original permitting on the C&D facility really doesn't have an economic purview. It really didn't come to us, which may be where the original questions, I mean, we did have some questioning a year ago about this. And Mr. Chairman, I raised this in the context of the fact that we're not going to hear the zoning articles about some of the changes in what might happen at Old South Road, which I think have fairly significant, or have the potential to have fairly significant economic impact on the town and on the taxpayers. Again, something that sort of slips through the cracks. So this is a long way around to saying, is it something that the board could take up in terms of thinking about whether it would be appropriate to require applicants who are here before the various town bodies to conduct an impact analysis of the fiscal impacts of their proposals on the taxpayers, so that we know what we're getting into ahead of, rather than sort of thinking there's going to be an impact and then looking at it after it's too late to really do anything about it.
It is. Two answers on that. First is, as for, you mentioned the Old South zoning.
Right.
We certainly can comment on zoning articles. What this committee has done in the past has been to go along with the planning board recommendations. We are not, but we do have in the charter, we can comment on any article we want. So if this committee so feels to do that, we can. So we're not bound by not doing it. The second, as for the Reese landfill on, transfer station on New South Road, we were aware of that a year and a half ago, and we did, as a committee, send a letter to the board. I guess, how should I put it, my consternation, I suppose, on that. But from a legislative or fiduciary, or, excuse me, I don't think I use that word, from a process standpoint, none of it had to come through the Finance Committee. And you're absolutely correct. I inquired with the Board of Health, and they don't look at one penny. That's not their they couldn't care less. And they did go by the law, and it was fine. I'll echo what Tim said. It is a sad situation that has occurred, because the idea was to environmentally improve the Maya Common area, as we all know, and we weren't, and I'll admit myself, didn't have enough foresight to see of the unintended consequences. So I don't know how we as a committee could have juxtaposed ourselves into that discussion. We're always, and I'm looking at the chairman of the Board of Selectmen, can always make a recommendation to the board on this or on any subject, and they can do it as what they see fit. I hope I'm being specific. I'm trying to be.
No. I mean, I know that we can't do anything about it, and that in order to, I mean, we can comment on it, but we're going to comment without a lot of facts, because
that's correct.
There's no information unless somebody wants to go and dig through it. So, as I say this, I'm looking, to our board chairman and others. Is there an appetite to think about a way to have an analysis done when everybody can see that there's potential to have a fiscal impact, and have the applicants get it done, and so that when a decision is made, which town meeting is going to make on these zoning changes, that the voters understand that if you agree with X, there's a likely outcome of Y that's going to go along with it.
Tim?
I have a half.
Tim, oh, I'm sorry, Jim first, I'm sorry, I was reading people. Jim and then Tim.
Can we put on the agenda for the next meeting a review of any zoning articles that we think might have a financial implication and ask for an impact?
The answer is yes, but just want to bring up that we have 2 meetings, February 11th and 13th, dedicated to real estate and zoning.
No, I'm saying,
That's not what you're saying?
to talk about as an agenda item, since we need to post it, to review the list of zoning articles.
Before the planning director
On
comes
Monday,
in.
just look at the titles and
Yeah.
say, does anybody think this has a financial impact?
I see what you're
Yes.
saying.
Okay, we'd
Sure.
like to ask the town manager or whatever to do an impact analysis.
The answer is yes, we can do
I don't know
that for
what
Monday.
the process is for doing that,
All
but
right.
I'd like to do that.
What I can do for Monday is add a agenda item is to a preliminary discussion of zoning articles. Would that be?
And I don't know if we need, I mean, it sounds like, I don't know what those articles are, it sounds like.
Either do I haven't looked at them at all.
Sounds like somebody here knows. I don't think we need a
Well,
presentation.
the only thing that I know, and I'll
Well, I don't know, but I mean, I don't know if we need anybody besides this group to have that conversation.
Well, the only thing that, to answer your question, that I know, that I was at the Board of Selectmen meeting last night, and they were talking about zoning, and before I fell asleep, listening to it, is that there was a number of zonings, and what did perk my attention was that a lot... like we do, I forget it. But in all seriousness, what did pick my interest was what David mentioned, is that there's some zoning changes for Old South. What they are, I'm not specific about. Okay. But what I can do, and I'm sure it'd be added for Monday, be great, is to contact the planning director and see if I can get a preliminary, because I think it is preliminary, list of these zoning to comply with your request.
Whatever.
I
think we need to, it sounds like David knows what some of them are, maybe, I don't know. But
Probably no, but I just know there's something in the works.
I know I read the 2, related to Old South Road, and when I read them, it looks like, there's a big change that's planned there. And
well, then we can.
you don't need to be a rocket scientist to figure out the guy didn't buy the land to...
If you know what that is, if you know what the issues are, then we should say to the town, we need an impact analysis.
Let me endeavor to get the information to you. Now, before, I think we got it off solid waste on this discussion, so, but why don't we finish up solid waste and come back? I just want to be jumping around.
We're done with solid waste, that's why...
I think, if we are, that's great. I just want to be sure I'm going to close it then. Okay. Kara, thank you very much. I guess with solid waste... Oh, do you have a question? Before you do, I'm going to say it. But with solid waste, is that we do have a budget now, but we can expect that before town meeting, we will be seeing another budget.
Yes.
Okay. John?
Kara, goes back to sewer. I heard you were talking, right now, the latest capital plan I have is that in 2016, you were talking about the Nantucket wastewater treatment process, if we want to call it that, because it's more than just a plant. It's for about $69,800,000. You gave some that you said that's not going to be, that's going to change.
Right.
What's that going to be changed to now?
What I'd like to do is get those numbers from Woodard and Curran rather than trying to quote them off my head, top of my head, and I'll get those for you.
Because we're going to be, the capital program committee is going to be meeting starting next week again, looking at the plan as opposed to the budget that's this year. And that's
What I would feel more comfortable doing is, once we have the capital plan, the draft capital plan from the CWMP, is providing that to you. Because right now, I think as we discussed at the capital planning meeting, is that there's a number in there for Monomoy, there's a number in there for Shimo, and those are really just placeholders. So just look at Nantucket as a placeholder at this point.
What's the timing of getting those?
I'll check with Rosemary Blakier. We have a conference call that I can check with her and find out when that'll be available.
Because, okay. Now, last, again, about the sewer, and we didn't discuss it, but I made an assumption looking at your revenue line that there's no rate increase anticipated
Right.
there,
Correct.
because I didn't see it in the numbers, and but I thought, rather than be implicit, let's be explicit about this.
You are correct.
And that's, so my assumption was there's no rate increase there, but it does look like we're running to the ragged edge a little bit going forward.
Moving out.
Because we are talking about running a deficit, which we're going to pick up from retained earnings this coming year, I mean in 2015.
We're going to, we're using a little bit of retained earnings, on the
Some amount,
200 and something thousand dollars of retained
Yeah.
earnings.
But if your point is going forward, we have all these millions and millions of dollars for sewer projects, yes, we are going to have to do rate increases in all the.
For those,
Yeah, so you kind of put,
Not done yet.
yeah.
not for 15.
Yeah. And one of the things that you indicated on your plan, you said key issue, which I would certainly agree with you. It says an equitable financing plan for the proposed capital plan will be the biggest issue for the sewer enterprise fund.
Yeah.
I'd
And that's
say
something that,
For the town.
right. Yeah. And that's something that the sewer planning work group that Tim is a part of is going to delve into deeply.
Thank you for saying that, Kara. I wanted to caution about Woodward and Curran's capital plan going to you anytime soon.
Right.
Because-
It needs to be vetted through the working group and the Board of Selectmen.
Well, then we'll need some numbers.
Well, John,
We
what
don't
I
need
want-
them from them. Your numbers are better than ours.
well, what I'm saying is they'll be meaningless, because the sewer planning work group and Woodward and Curran have not jived what the outcome of the CWMP is going to look like. So I think it would be a waste of your time to get those numbers if there's not buy-in. You wouldn't want to set up a situation where you had the capital group thinking one thing, only to find out that the conclusions were something totally different, John. That's all I'm suggesting.
So we're not ready.
No.
That's the answer.
And I
It
think
just
Kara would
takes
agree
time.
with that.
We would like to see an updated numbers on whatever you have in there
I
for
think
our
it-
meeting next week.
I think that
we can debate it later, but you don't.
Well, the numbers are what they are, the process will go, hopefully it'll go a little bit quicker than it has been, and then when there are accurate numbers, they'll come forward. So I think that, with that, if there's any other, Steve, yeah.
I just had a question. I'm looking at the solid waste budget in fiscal year 2011. Every expenditure ended in zero.
I believe finance rounds.
That's pretty good.
Rounds them.
It's a good year.
I guarantee you they weren't all zero.
Shoveling shit against the
I believe that's something that's done in-house in finance, just for expediency.
Right? What do you just said?
These are all zeros, and these all have numbers. The older numbers, all of them did zero. Maybe zero. There are 4, 1, 6, 3, 6.
Yeah, it's rounding.
It's just
but, yeah,
rounding.
it's rounding.
Are we all set with solid waste and sewer? Going once, going twice? We'll be back. So, Kara, thank you very much. I always learn a lot. Okay, before we close up, on Monday's meeting, if you look on the schedule, there was talk about revolving funds. After discussions with Martin and with Debbie Dilworth, who's no longer here, the revolving funds would, and Martin, if I got this wrong, jump in, would be easier to discuss when talking about the individual departments, and it would be more relevant. So we are going to drop that from Monday's meeting for now. Now, any questions on that? Jim?
Yeah, we thought of that as a scenario, but I mean, not so much me, but I know others said it was important to get a global view.
Debbie explained, this is where I'm going to rely on Martin, because I was one of the ones that said that. And
People said?
Yeah, I was like the one, I think I'm the first one that said it. Debbie, from an accounting and finance standpoint, found it difficult to present that as a whole, and it was more productive to go through departments. Am I getting that correct,
I think we wanted
Martin?
a both and.
Yes,
We
and
did.
also, you go forecasts as well. Last year, as you remember, you got for the first year forecast with fund balance, forecast, and you're going to get that again. But we're going to include it with every department anyway, so the departments will talk about it in detail with you. So that's why, that's where this came from.
Okay. Well, and to be honest with you, I'm deferring to Debbie. It's I guess a little philosophical change than from the past. Would that also be a way of?
Well, because the format changed also from the past. I mean, the past you get revolving funds at once, and that position you never got any departments because you got individual budgets after that, but they did not include revolving funds as part of them in the summer.
Okay.
So when you get plus next year, next week, and 5 departments, you're going to have as part of their budget the
With the
revolving
revolving.
funds as well. Each one individually with spreadsheets attached to the back and the forecasts.
Okay.
So
Okay. So we'll just a second for Jim. So that's the intention. To be honest with you, I'm listening to the professionals on that.
Well, we have some professionals here that had other expectations, so John, I know, and David, I thought, really wanted to have a global discussion too, so, but they can speak for themselves.
If they're not ready to do it, then they're not ready to do it, and that's the long and the short of it. I wouldn't want anybody to think that it's not useful, because for me, it's very useful to look at the revolver funds in total, and to walk through each fund as we did. I think we did it a little bit last year. But, you can't get blood out of a stone. And so, if that's not, but I don't want us to think that we're not going to do it because it's not useful. I think we may not do it because they're not ready to give us the information.
Okay.
That's where I'm coming from.
All right. So noted. All right. David?
Again, I would just, I'm comfortable with just including it with the departments, as long as it's not buried in, an account code that it makes up only a part of.
You get them the same way you get the detail for the general, for the operating and personnel expense. You get the same thing, plus the forecast for each one, plus the spreadsheets that are associated whenever there are personnel costs that apply to those volumes. So you're getting the complete picture. You're going to get absolutely everything you want in this.
What you won't.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I think our staff issue here was not that we're not ready, but that we're going to need, Martin and Debbie and I are not intimately familiar with revolving funds. So we can tell you what they are and what they're for, but we're going to need the departments here again, in addition to when they're coming to present their budgets to you already, to help explain them if that's what you're looking for.
Right.
If there's going to be questions that are detailed about funds, we might not know the answer.
Yes.
We don't want to sit here and say, we don't know, we have to find out.
Okay.
Yes,
it is. Go ahead.
Yeah. For me, the thing, what's of interest is that when you look at it when we look at it on a department budget basis, we certainly can look at it and say, this much is coming from the revolver fund, this much is coming from here. What you don't see is, here's the revolver fund, here's where it's going out, and here's what's left.
You want to see exactly that on the forecast. You have the starting fund balance, all the forecast revenue expenses. You have a bottom fund balance that moves next year and goes up to 2018. You want to see all the detail. Plus the personnel spread, whenever there is salaries associated with them, you want to see personnel spreadsheets so you can ask the department how they're splitting it, because some of them are very complicated to explain.
So we're going to see that when we see the departmentals.
Yes, of course, yeah, it's going to be part of the budget.
That's
document.
fine.
You want to see the-
Okay.
All right, great. So, that being the case, on Monday, that has been dropped off, and that was our main topic of discussion. Getting back to the zoning, I don't know if I can get that information together for you tomorrow, which we really would need to do, I think, to have a proper discussion for zoning on Monday. So instead of adding that on Monday, I would like to add that at a later time when I know I can secure the information. Jim?
All I wanted I mean, if somebody thinks we should have an impact analysis on 2 articles, we can just ask for that.
I am, that's what, but I don't, but I might not be able to get it by tomorrow. Yeah, I agree
No,
with you.
we can't. Oh, I thought we had to have it on the agenda to make that decision, to discuss it. We just want to discuss it among ourselves.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm not saying we
We don't
don't. I'm
want-
just trying to
we
get some
don't-
information so
I
that,
don't think we need any information. We never let lack of information keep us from making.
I'm not sure I'm following you. Libby?
I just want to put it on the agenda.
Okay.
So we can have a discussion about, does anybody think any of the zoning articles need a financial impact?
Okay, that's
Just so it doesn't get
Yes,
lost.
Yes, we do. Which ones? Numbered 1 and number 2.
But what if we don't have the zoning articles there to know which ones?
Because
we want?
somebody said they've been reviewing them.
Well, but I would need to get a list. Well, all I'm saying is I want to get you a list.
Oh,
Okay, Libby?
so we can get a list by one.
Yes, we do.
And I can give you, if you want to have this discussion, the ones that we've gotten so far
Right.
from planning.
Right.
Which, as we heard last night, there may be some number that we don't have.
That's right. That's-
Some of us is right. So
Right.
I think it's minimal numbers.
So we'll take the information we have.
Okay, I just, all I'm saying
I
is,
don't think you need to do anything.
well,
Just get,
Just change it.
oh, good, I don't have to do it.
Just
I want-
change the agenda. I'm not asking.
All we need to say is review.
Preliminary review, all right, that's fine. Here, Jim, here, just before we get an argument, all I'm trying to do is get you the zoning articles that planning is submitting to the
Okay,
board. That's all I wanted to do, and
okay,
I'm not sure,
okay.
my thing was, I'm not sure I can get that by tomorrow. That's my issue. So that's all I'm saying. But sure, what the hell, I don't care. Tim, then Craig.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I thought David's point was more of a global point, not specific to this year, but there's a hole in our process. Did I hear you correctly, Dave?
I actually had 2 issues, and I originally started by asking Christie to just, reaffirm the process, which is we tend not to look at zoning articles. And the two citizens articles are the ones that are, I think, from my view, represent the greatest impact. I don't know what the other town-sponsored articles are. But I think that there's a 2-part issue. One is, I think we have an issue with the citizens articles that may warrant having somebody take a look at, so we don't find ourselves in the solid waste situation. And the second is, there is a hole in the process, which is that you've got a variety of boards that approve things, and nobody, for which there may be a financial impact on the taxpayers, and we don't have a process to tease out that information to make a decision.
Yeah.
That's where I thought you were going with it. And
And-
I think that's an excellent observation, and what we should do, in my opinion, is maybe start with a little homework with town council to see if there's any statutory prohibition against the finance committee putting forward a charter change that, when things came along, would automatically trigger this to be something that did come to our wheelhouse. And so I think we should explore this a little bit. But I think the first stop would be with town council to see if there's prohibition against that.
Yeah, that's fine. It would be great if we didn't have to do a charter change, that it fell within the statutory purview of the board of selectmen or somebody to add this as a requirement in the process of.
Well, I was just trying to think of a way, David, to make sure that it doesn't get circumvented in the future. That's all I was trying to say.
Whatever, I'm.
This might sound dumb, but how do you know what it would be?
What do you mean?
How do you know what the issue would be that you need to do the fiscal impact analysis? Who's going to determine, this issue might be have fiscal impact, FinCom should review it. Right now, there's potentially, maybe, zoning that I will readily say I put over somewhere else, so.
So what?
Pay a lot of attention to it.
You know.
But, maybe I should, but that would have to.
That's fine.
Anyway, if these couple of citizen articles, and FinCom's looking at them, it's occurring to people that might be a fiscal impact on the community or the town or the taxpayer. Why doesn't FinCom just say, hey, there might be a fiscal impact here.
Right.
Dear Board of Selectmen, you ought to have something to look at.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Right. That's what I'm trying to say.
Tim?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Well, this may sound dumb in response, but I actually think that there have been situations where the town manager has said that there's going to be an impact, and it has fallen on deaf ears. So my thought would be to put something in place that regardless whether you have a progressive finance committee that wants to look at it, or a finance committee that maybe has their head in the sand, that there's a process that triggers somebody to look at it. I just was trying to make it a little, I was just trying to make it a little more ironclad.
Yeah,
I
requires
know
it,
what you're
yeah.
saying. I'm just not sure at all how that would.
But I'm wondering, I have to look at the definitions, if that's already in the charter definition. I don't know.
Well, there's a general charge to the finance committee,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman? There's no question about that?
Yeah.
But like the Reese thing or other planning things that may not ever come across the selectmen's desk, there may be things that happen that never come through the front door, so to speak, so we would never get asked to. That's all I'm trying to.
That's true.
That's why I thought we should start with council.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Matt, I think,
John?
I think what Tim's looking for is something that requires,
Yeah.
not something that we should do or it'd be nice to do, but something that requires us to look at certain things. In other words, that puts, you said, because in the past, it has been, the financial impact has been raised up and it's been dissipated. And he's saying, how do we avoid it from being dissipated in the future? And the only way you can think of it, and me either, is that somehow it's got to be required. And we as a board are required to look at certain things, you know what I mean? Not that it's nice for us to look at certain things.
Well, that I would echo, and I'll go to David and Christie in a second, what you're saying, because I think that would, town council would be a place to start. David, then Christie.
Yeah, and what I would personally like to see is the burden be placed on the petitioner to do the work. I mean, I think that if we put the burden on, on Libby and the town and the various department heads, that, they've got a priority stack and it may or may not line up, notwithstanding whether it's required or not. I mean, you can pencil whip anything to meet a requirement. But I think if there were a way to require the petitioners, be it the town, if in fact a department was, putting forth something that was going to have an impact that hadn't been looked at. But I think most of this will end up being things that, groups or individuals want to do that require licensing that then have an impact. Add one more, Sconset Beach. Other than a few letters to the editor of people sort of noodling on their own, does that have a financial impact on the town? I mean, somebody's letter or editorial today about what is I guess it's a letter to the editor, but this is the second one of, what's the town's ongoing obligation?
Well, there is a warrant article specifically.
Yeah, and so, to me, it's not burdening the town with doing this work. It's making the petitioner do the work, which many communities require on certain things, that if you're going to propose an activity that, you analyze the impact. And I don't think it's overly burdensome. I think it's the kind of thing that, would be helpful to have the information both as a finance committee, but also, for the voters, if it's something that comes before town meeting, to know what the secondary and tertiary impacts might be of the decision you make.
That's fair. Jim?
I think it's a wonderful idea, because we spent a lot of time talking about whether the zoning is within the master plan, but there's certainly a financial master plan, and if this thing is going to decimate the financial plan, that we need to know about it. So I think it's an excellent idea.
Mr. Chairman?
No, of course, I'm sorry, yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking.
I think
Yeah.
it's a good discussion, and I think that, Tim, what you're really looking at, and what, Dave, you originally presented, I don't think we're going to be able to see that within this budget cycle and before town meeting. But I think that we're cognizant of it now, and I think we could discuss these within our normal agenda and under the normal warrant articles, and pay particular attention. I do think that it could be in our better interest to have town council to maybe give us an idea of the kind of things that we should be looking for, and that might help as we sort of review these. But I think it's a good idea to have some sort of process that you guys are discussing here. And
how about before, and I'll recognize you in a second. I think if the first step would be, to me, as I'm trying to think this through, would be a discussion with town council. And I mean, the first step would be, and Libby, I'm looking at you, is somehow if we could contact Mr. Giorgio and let him know our concerns and see what his response would be.
Maybe sometime when he's here.
Right.
We talk to him about that. It's not going to be special. thing.
Oh, no, not a special thing, but even like by.
You also, I mean, one of you, all your counterparts on other finance committees, ask them if they do anything. Stu guy Cliff left, because he's going to the, who else has?
Cliff and David.
I've been to the association, I don't know how effective those meetings are, but, you know, call
I could do
around
that.
and see what they do.
Tim?
Might not be doing that.
Well, I think the reason I said to start with town council, because I think it'll be a very short conversation, either you can or you can't. I think there's a ton of case law, planning boards and communities all across Massachusetts have tried to link things on. I forget the term that Warnicki used to use. He called it linkage, but there's a technical term for it. But I think there's pretty clear case law how far you can go as a community on asking an applicant. And I think we should start with council, because I think he'll know what our parameters can be. I'm not sure to go to another finance committee. I think we'd just be asking people an opinion without a fact.
Well, there is there might be some benefit to even anecdotal, though. Might be. So if everyone is okay with that, unless there are anything, we can use that two-prong approach with town council when here, and try to do it the easiest way, and then reaching out to other communities.
And then we don't need to have it on the Monday's agenda.
No, I don't think. I was asking you to have a later agenda.
Yes? No?
What?
No. I don't think we can't put something new on the agenda for Monday now. It's past the time, isn't it?
I think we can do it tomorrow, can't we?
We can.
Tomorrow we could.
We can, because the agenda is already posted, the meeting is posted, so we're in compliance. We can have agenda.
Yeah,
We're changing the agenda.
Okay.
But if you don't want to, that's fine.
Oh, no, let's talk. No, I'm just the steward of the committee. And my only concern is what I said to you before, is that I'm fine putting it on the agenda. It's just that will we have, we have the citizen warrant articles here, we have that, but I would like to get, I think to your point, is get the planning warrants from planning. And I think that would make that a more inclusive discussion.
Well, wouldn't we want to do that at the same time, know whether or not we have a legal right to ask for it?
I'm convinced now we need town council, so.
Oh, you're not?
I am.
He is.
Oh, good. Okay. Okay, so then maybe better to postpone that. Okay, fine.
And I
Great.
think Christie's point, Mr. Chairman, just so you don't get over tasked on this, I don't think we're looking for something this is maybe for a warrant article for a future town meeting, not this one. It's too late for that.
Yeah, I have to jot down the thoughts.
Well-
Christie, then.
No, I think this is a good rehearsal that we should go through and
That's fine.
what Dave pointed out.
No, I as we've been going on, I'm getting, I think that we ought to take a look at, as a finance committee, the citizens' articles that have to do with zoning, because they are so significant in the change, and the development potential is so great that we could be looking at, new road structures, any number of those kinds of things that are going to be have a direct impact. And I don't know what the planning board looks at and the zoning guys look at, and whether this would even get on there. They may know that it has a potential to be an impact, but if they have no statutory authority to bring it up, and if you get for example, let's say the zoning board or the planning board gave an endorsement of the new changes out there on the basis that they complied and did all the planning things they were supposed to do. But we look at it and say, we think that there's going to be a financial impact to the taxpayer because of this. And those activities broadly could be X, Y, and Z. We may, as a committee, come to the conclusion that we do not want to accept the planning board's recommendation because of the impacts that it might
Because
have
of the financial
financially.
It's a great point.
And then it goes to town meeting, and at least, we've taken a look at it from, to the extent that we have information available to us, to say, from a financial perspective, we've got an issue.
Town meeting floor.
And let town, let
Let it
town
go. No,
meeting,
you're absolutely-
make the
everything is right.
decision,
Yeah.
rather than doing it on a,
So I made the assumption that if somebody wants to do something like that, and it includes an infrastructure, they have to pay for it.
Correct.
Oh, okay.
but what if it doesn't include infrastructure, but it's a tertiary or secondary impact? It increases the traffic counts at Old South Road by
Yeah.
Oh,
75%.
On public, yeah.
okay, okay.
Tim?
I think that we're kind of speculating here, because we don't know what the planning board's going to rule. They may
That's true.
be all-inclusive, they
We
may
don't know.
not be.
That's all fair.
And
That's fair, too.
And so all I was going to say is, we have 2 agenda dates on the agenda already.
Yes.
Hopefully, the planning board will have their findings in place, at least in draft form, so that we can look at them. And then we'll know whether or not to sound the warning bell or whatever, or dig into it deeper with more dates. I think we got 2 things at work here. We're talking about the short term and this warrant, and then we're talking about the more global issue, but that there's a process issue, and that we should just keep those 2 separate as we talk about this, because I think they're getting blurred. I think we're all set up for what David's concern is,
For the short term. I would agree with that. One thing, now, our public hearing is February 10th, and being that I did not even contact the citizens who sponsored the zoning articles, I will contact them for February 10th, number one. Number two is I'd like to find out when the planning board will have their public hearing. Does anybody know that offhand? Okay. Yeah, I'll find out, and I'll get back to you on that. And that also will have some relevancy for us, because just as you said, is that we may have a better idea how the planning board feels on these issues. So I'll look into that. And thirdly, is coming back to the point, is I will try to get, even before the warrant is completed, a list of the zoning articles for reviews, just to get the heads up. Okay.
Would it be nice, and do you think it's possible to get a read from town council before we do zoning articles? On whether we
I can try, and I'll talk with Libby about
Would that be helpful?
I'll try. Yeah, I think it would be. I'll try to do that. I will attempt to do that. In fact, I better write this down. So. Good. Okay, so, yeah, that's fine. So if, so steps are town council, discussions with planning, and we have our dates set for right now. Getting back to the immediate matter of hand on Monday, is that being that, again, revolving funds is off the table, what does the committee feel about having a meeting? I think my personal sense is that we could cancel it. And, because we're doing well with everything's going along, so unless any objections, we'll go ahead and cancel the meeting on Monday.
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chairman, that we cancel the meeting on Monday.
Okay, motion made.
Second.
Second, okay, and discussion? Okay, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Meeting's canceled. Great. And then our next meeting will be Tuesday, January 14th at 4:15 somewhere in the high school. I don't know, do you know if it's the cafeteria or the middle school yet? Okay, well, one of the places, we'll let you, you know what, I'll email you, or you'll email.
Yeah.
Tuesday's going to be at the high school.
Yes, every Tuesday that's the high school.
And that's going to be it's a 4:15.
4:15.
Yep.
We just don't know if it's the high school or the middle school.
That's
We'll
right.
find out. And that will be Town Administration Board of Selectmen overview of the fiscal year 2015 general fund budget recommendations. Okay? All right. Oh, and one other thing is that I have not heard back from Mr. Fee, and so I was hoping he would stay.
He was going to stay.
So, but I will give an update when I do. Okay? All right. Unless there's anything else, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So move.
And,
Go Patriots.
okay, everybody, go Patriots. Everybody have a nice weekend. And Jim?
Well done.
Oh, Matt, I wasn't trying to be difficult.
No, I don't take it that way at all.
I know.
But no, you see my point? It just, if I.
Well, now I know that that's the only reason we needed to meet on Monday. We didn't need to talk about that. No, I'm talking about the zoning.
I will say initially, initially came through.
Me, I never look at it either. Right.
But that's fine, we certainly have the broad.
Yeah.
This is going to take us just as well.
Well,
Oh, yeah. You know, we've got